Then you get to the Chicago Bears. The Chicago bleeping Bears. They agreed to a one-year deal with Andy Dalton worth a reported $10 million with another $3 million in incentives. Now my reaction to that is, why? The hell is that? Why? Then my secondary reaction is, of course they did. The Buffalo Bills got better, and the Chicago Bears got, well, more Chicago Bears. That is maybe the most Chicago Bears thing ever. Has anybody ever failed at anything in life the way the Bears have failed at getting a quarterback? And I'm not talking about this year either, or last year. I'm talking about every year. Every single year since the punky QB left. And then even before that. You remember when Matt Nagy thought that a kicker was their only problem? Thought that their kicker missing that field goal was the only thing standing between them and greatness. So he spent the entire offseason worrying about a kicker, trying out every kicker who ever kicked. Remember that? That was pretty smart. That was pretty smart. And by pretty smart, I mean stupid. But this move, though, for Dalton is their crowning achievement. And that's not to bash Andy Dalton. Because, I mean, it is very fashionable to crush Dalton and to say that Dalton completely sucks. He actually doesn't. And I'm not here to do that. He's been to multiple Pro Bowls. He led the Bengals to the playoffs 5 straight years. I mean, hell, there were even dopes who thought that Dallas was signing him to take Dak's job. I mean, he was never great, and he's not as good as he used to be, but let's not act like this guy's Chad Henne either. The problem with the Chicago Bears is not that they signed Andy Dalton. And let me correct that. It's not that they signed Andy Dalton. You don't sign Andy Dalton at this point. You end up with Andy Dalton. You don't set out to sign Andy Dalton. You just kind of end up with him. The problem, though, is not Dalton. It's who they didn't get. It's that Andy Dalton is not Russell Wilson. In fact, he's about as far from Russell Wilson in every way imaginable as you can get. That's your problem. That's the issue with the Bears. The Bears, incredibly, and I mean incredibly, were one of the 4 teams that Russ's agent named as a place of interest for Russ. Of all the teams in the league, Chicago was one that Russell Wilson was actually interested in going to, for reasons that nobody could quite explain. One of the best quarterbacks in football. I mean, a guy who's going to end up in the Hall of Fame one day. One of the best to ever do it said that he wanted to play in Chicago. Like, I understand that Russ is a different dude, but that makes no sense to me on any level. I don't understand that at all. But here's what I do understand. If you're the garbage Chicago Bears, and for whatever crazy reason, Russell Wilson actually is willing to play for you, actually wants to play for you, for reasons I'll never understand. But if he does, you have 2 choices, just 2 choices. You mortgage the damn future, and you do whatever the hell you can to get a still in his prime future Hall of Famer before he comes to his senses. You make that deal. Or you just say, nah, we're good, we're not interested. That's it. Those are your 2 options, because the NFL is actually a very simple league. You either have a quarterback or you don't. You either have a quarterback or you're looking for a quarterback. And if you have a quarterback, everything else becomes so much easier. If you do not have a quarterback, you have to make moves for guys like Nick Foles and Andy Dalton. So, when Russell Wilson says he wants to come, if you're lucky enough to be on his list, especially if you're the garbage Chicago Bears, and you've got no business being on that list, and you were interested in this guy, and why the hell wouldn't you be? You do whatever it takes to get this guy. If you're shopping for Russell Wilson, you cannot leave the store and come home with Andy Dalton. That's not how crap works. That's not the way it works. That's like going to shop for a Mercedes and coming home with a Merkur. That's like heading out for an all-time Vegas bender and ending up in Laughlin. I'm not saying that Andy Dalton's the worst quarterback ever. What I'm saying is the Bears have the worst quarterback situation ever. And for the first time since, well, I don't know, ever. A great quarterback wanted to play in Chicago, and instead of getting him, you end up with Andy Dalton. And it didn't take long before the Dalton news broke that the Bears were out here spinning their asses off because they know how bad that looks. They know they can't sell this to their players or their fans or anybody else. Adam Schefter reported that Chicago made, quote, a very aggressive pursuit of Wilson. Ian Rappaport reported something similar, saying that Bears GM Ryan Pace and Seahawks GM John Schneider met last week at the Trey Lance Pro Day to see if something might be worked out. Let me tell you something. If you get that far, you better finish that job. Do you think that if Russell Wilson said that he wanted to be a Patriot, that Bill Belichick would have ended up with Andy Dalton? Hell no. He would have made it happen. You have to make it happen. Belichick would have found a way to make that happen. Might not have been 100% clean, but at the end of it, Russell Wilson would have been wearing a Patriots jersey. What's up, Hood? Even if you try to make the argument that, you know what, Seattle really doesn't want to move Russ, and Seattle really isn't going to move Russ. They're not. Personally, I don't buy that. I think they would. But even if you do, that's fine. They're not going to move their Hall of Famer. Great. Then it would be better to just let the Russell Wilson thing quietly die, then to sign Andy Dalton and remind everybody of who you did not get, and then who you did get. But the hell are you signing him for anyway? Because he's better than Nick Foles? Debatable. The quarterback competition that absolutely nobody asked for. Foles v. Dalton. As always, I don't want somebody telling me how to spend my money, so I'm not going to tell anybody else how to spend their money except the Bears. And since we don't know that Dalton is even as good or better than Foles, why not just go with Foles and then an even cheaper backup and then put the rest of the money into another position and go from there? Maybe you get lucky and a quarterback falls to you in the draft. Or if Foles works out, great. And if he doesn't, that's great too. Then you've got a better pick next year to go get a quarterback. That would be the smart move, but not the Chicago Bears move because they never make the smart move. They decided to bring back Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy this year, which means both guys are fighting for their jobs and need immediate results to keep their gigs. And what was their big swing? Their big swing to save their gigs and get right was to bring in Andy Dalton, which is why those two dudes are fighting for their jobs in the first place and frankly should have been canned already. Most of all, this is why the Bears are the Bears. I don't know. Maybe Russ got confused. Maybe Russ meant the Chicago Bulls. You know, run with Zach LaVine and Lauri Markkanen. Or maybe he thought or meant the Chicago Cubs. Maybe he wants to join the rotation with Kyle Hendricks and Zach Davies. Yeah, I know. Sounds kind of ridiculous, right? But not as ridiculous as him wanting to be with the Chicago Bears. Other than Andy Dalton and his immediate family, is there anybody anywhere happy about this? Deep down, if you ask Dalton, I bet he's not happy about this. My bad, man. My bad. I really do suck, actually. Are you kidding me? You settled for me instead of Russell Wilson. How stupid are you guys? Man.